Hello and good morning friends, it's Daniel here from jscraft.io. In this example today I would like to take a look with you at how we can upload multiple files in React. Let's see the final example in action. We have a simple file chooser where we can select multiple files. For example, I will select 3 pictures. We'll see a full list of the selected images, and when I will press send to server, we'll get this nice upload animation, and finally, when everything is done, we can see in the console the files that were sent to the server. As a server, we will use HTTP bin, which is basically a simple HTTP request and response server that we can use as an alternative to a real server. And now, let's take a look at what we have in the starting template of the exercise. First of all, we have this useState variable that is an empty array, and the files array will contain the actual files that we will send to the server. Next, there is this handle upload click method, now just an empty method, that is called when we press the send to server button. And finally, there is the input of type file, which is basically the file chooser, and in this case is configured to accept only images, but we should be able to use this approach with any type of files. And as a final note, we have this multiple attribute that will allow us to select multiple files in the file chooser by holding down the Ctrl key. So this is what we'll start with in this example. Let's now see what are the steps that are needed to be taken in order to complete the exercise. First of all, we should be able to select some files, and also we will list them in the UI. Next, all of these files will be packed in order to be able to upload them as a single entity. We will actually do the upload next and check what are the results, and finally we'll do some visual feedback in order to have something like a loading state while the upload is taking place. Before we start, consider subscribing to the channel, and if you want to skip ahead, there is a link in the description of this video with the full code for the example. Also, I've linked another tutorial that I've done some while ago with how to copy just some simple text to the clipboard using React. Then, let's get to work. Let's start with the first one, selecting the files that are to be uploaded. As said, we have this input that accepts multiple files. We'll need a way to hook up the results from when the user is selecting these multiple files with this useState variable. And in order to do this, what I will do here is come and add an onChange event. And when the user is changing the uploaded files, these files will be set on the useState variables. So let's see how it goes. I will save it, and now I will select some files, and you can see now that in the file chooser we have 3 selected files. But this is not enough, because if you take a look at our final example, we see how many files were uploaded, but also we can see the actual name of the files. For this, I will need to come here and add a new method. This method will be called render file list. And basically what it will do is to go through all of the files that were selected and list them in a list item. We'll also need to do the actual calling of this method, and what I will do, come here and say render file list. And now let's take a new look at our example. I will come here, select 2 files, and I will press open, and we will see also the actual name of the files that will be uploaded to the server. So this concludes our first step. The next part will be to take all of the files and pack them in order to be uploaded. Let's see how we can do this. We said at the beginning of this exercise that we are using HTTP bin to have a test server for our example. So for this, I will come here and add two constants. The API URL being HTTP bin, and given the nature of our call, we will use a post method in order to send the data. Now, coming back to the actual packing, I will come here and add a new method. This method is called pack files, and what does it do is to take all of those files that we are selecting and pack them into just one single entity, and the files are differentiated based on a given key. So if you take a look, we have here the FormData, and this is the documentation for it. The FormData is an API that is independent of React. You can use it with any framework, but what it allows us is to make key pair values representing all kinds of data. In this case, each value will be an actual image. And we are using out of this FormData the pen method to put one item at a time in the final data package. And now that we have added this method, I will come here in the handle upload click and also call it. So if our files are selected, so if files.length, then go and do the actual packing. So now when the user is clicking this send to server button, this method is called, and if files are selected, then the pack files method is called. At this point, our example will not do something visible. So the next step will be to go and do the actual upload of the files and to check the results. For this, I will go back to the main file, and in here we will need to define the new function. This function will be after pack files and will be named upload files. It will actually do the upload of the files. And let's see what it does. It gets as a parameter some data, and after that it does a fetch call to the API URL. That API is the HTTP bin service, and when all the request is done, it will console log the output of the response. Now that we have created this method, we'll also need to call it, and in here, in the handle upload click, after we do all the packing of the files, I'll call the upload files method with the packed files, with the data. And now let's see our example. I'll go back and let's pick some image files. I'll go on the desktop, in the images, I will pick all three of them, and now I will press send to server. It will take a bit of time, and when the response comes, you will see now that in the files we have a blob representation of the pictures that we have sent to the server. Cool, so we more or less did the example, but there are some final details that we need to put in place. For example, let's go to the final example, and in here you'll see that when we are picking the images and we are sending them to the server, we are seeing that upload state. This is not something that we have currently in our example, but we can easily implement it. For this, I will first need to go, and where we have the constants in here, I will add two new constants. First of all, when status is idle and when status is uploading. The next step will be to come here and add a new state variable named status. This status will track if our application is uploading a file or everything is idle. By default, it will start from the idle status. And now, when we start the uploading of the files, we will need to call set status, And I will use here the constant that I've defined earlier and say status uploading. So when we first upload the files, we'll also set the status to uploading. And finally, when everything will have completed, I will call in the finally clause of the fetch, I will say that I want to set the status back to status idle. And with all of this setup in place, what I can do now is to go at the button, and first I will make this button disabled while the uploading is taking place. So here I will add a new condition saying that if the status is status uploading, the disable attribute for the button will be set to true. So let's now see our new version of the example. I will pick the files, I will say open, and when I will press the send to server, you'll see now the button is disabled while the uploading is taking place. So coming back to our steps, what we have done here is to add the visual feedback for the uploading test. One last thing that we can do is to define the new method named getStatusText, and this method will set a given text to the button based on if the status is idle or not. And now, instead of having just this simple text here, I will do the calling of this getStatusText method, and let's see our final example. I will go pick up some images, send them to server, and we'll see now that we also have this nice loading indicator. And yeah, this is it. I hope you liked the tutorial. It was quite long, but also I think was fun. In the description of this video, you will find a link to the blog post for the example. In there is also the full code and more info. If you like this type of content, please subscribe. You can also join my newsletter, and see you the next time. Cheers, bye bye.